we're going to take a look at something most of us, probably all of us, carry with us all the time, and maybe don't ever actually look at them, period. They have wonderful shapes, and you move them a tiny little bit and you have an entirely different image or sculpture or drawing on your hands. I actually had planned to do this, and then last week we were working with pen and ink, and one of the students hadn't brought a tool along to draw, and so I suggested she draw keys. So I hope she doesn't mind that we're doing this again. But actually, as I say, there are so many things one could do with it. We don't have to do pen and ink. I'll show how we might do that in a second, but it's also a great subject to do a very traditional drawing. And one of the things I love about it is that they're relatively small, but you can do them upsize and then really, really look at the details. And that can be kind of fun too. And as a matter of fact, it's important to do it upsize, that is larger than life, because otherwise you really can't get all of those details if you're so inclined into it. And this is, of course, much, 3 or 4 times bigger. It would actually be fun to do it even bigger than that, bigger than life and exaggerated, a sort of Alice in Wonderland look. So again, I would look at the big shapes, and the first thing I would notice is that we think of this as round, but it isn't really round. It's really an ellipse. It's really an oval. So it's wider. You can eyeball that, but we can check it. It's wider than it is tall. Not a lot, but some. So as I usually start, I would get that big shape. And I'm going to do this one bigger than the one I just showed you. Make sure I've got a point here on I love mechanical pencils because they never get dull. It's hard for me to keep an eraser on them because I use my eraser so much, but I have my nifty kneaded eraser here if I need it, pun intended. So again, I would start with this big shape, and I've discovered to get a regular circle or an ellipse, if I just go very lightly around, my muscle memory kind of makes a rather smooth image there, and then I can go around and follow. I'm standing up and leaning over the camera, so this is my hand isn't quite as steady as it would be if I was focusing only on this. But anyway, one can find the edge that they feel is the most accurate. Now here I have a hole, and this hole is circular. And I would actually set this down and pose it like this because I get some nice little shadows in there. And I want that loop to lay down a little bit there so I can get, oops, well that's weird. It's not laying down. It's going to be very hard. There we go, that's a little bit better. It's always important to pose the subject in a way that is interesting and also achievable. There are some subjects and the way we pose them, hands for instance, that just cannot be drawn that way. They will never look like hands. So it's always important to take a look at the subject we're drawing and make it possible to draw and also pleasing when we get done. So there's my little circle, and then I'm just going to very lightly indicate this chain loop. I'll probably come back and refine it. It disappears there and it goes over this hole, so I'll want to, just so I don't forget, I'm going to erase that part right there so that the chain looks like it's going over it. You would not see the edge of the circle of the key there. Anyway, then I would work on the shape of the bottom part of this, and I'm working lightly so I can make alterations if I need to. And then one could follow the actual shape of the way this key is cut. I think the first thing I want to do is I know that this edge is going to be straight, so I'm going to get that down. And looking at the proportion, the straight part is a little bit longer than the circle part, but not much. So that's where it would come if it was proportioned the same height as that section, and it's a little bit lower. So that actually is about where it should be. And then I would just continue, and now the cut edge here, I could follow what's there, or I could make up my own. It wouldn't really matter. I'd want to make it believable, I think, to make it look like a key. It comes to a little point down there, and then it's metal. So and so is the little loop here. So in order to show metal in black and white, we have to put some tone in there so that, for instance, where the light is hitting this edge, the light is catching it and it's lighter. The whole rest has a sort of, it's darker. So I'd want to get that in. And this would be fun to, I mean, seriously, to just do like huge. It'd be sort of surreal that way. Anyway, get this in, and then I'm going to protect that. So it's this right along here is indicating that light edge, oops, where the light is catching it there. So just to remind myself, I'm just going to very lightly put in some light crosshatch markings so that I don't forget and inadvertently color that part in, because I want to keep that right there where the light is showing it. And we're seeing that this edge of the key, so I'm going to refine that a little bit, but we don't see this edge, just the way I have it posed, just the way I'm looking at it. I can see, because there's a little bit of thickness to the key, so I can see part of that edge, and then it comes around and disappears right about there. So I'm going to show that, and I'll refine this, oops, this edge a little bit. And then again, I'm just going to remind myself that that wants to get some tone. I'll go in and probably make that darker, especially because that's quite a, but that at least gives me a road map. And then the, and then to get this to look like metal, there's a highlight right there, so I just won't even draw anything there. And there's a little tiny, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, a little tiny highlight right there as well. So I'm going to leave those two places without any tone. It's right about there. You want to try to get them where you see them, because otherwise the physics of the thing, the way the light is showing, if the highlights aren't where you see them, it's not going to make any sense. So this actually, as I'm looking at it, comes like this, and then does a little turn there. So I'm not going to put in anything right there. I'm not going to put any tone in there. And that already gives it. And if you do, and it gets a little bit too dark, way to deal with that is to just go in there with the eraser and go back and refine, leaving those little breaks in there, not drawing anything at all, indicates, and you can almost already feel the sparkle, so to speak, of that. Oops, I'm running out of time. So anyway, this is, I spent a little more time on this, so that's kind of fun. Then this is, keys are a great candidate for practicing contour drawing. because you don't go back and make changes with an eraser. This is, I put in the color later, which I thought was kind of fun because these keys have a little color, but you wouldn't have to. And I really did this with a sort of stream of consciousness. If you were writing, that's what you would call it, or contour drawing is what we call it in art. So I posed it in something interesting, and then I literally just looked at the shapes. Now, I didn't close my eyes or anything like. Sometimes contour drawing practices are done not looking at the object at all. I'm not going to do that, but I'm not going to measure. I'm eyeball measuring, and just putting down very fresh marks, not thinking about it a whole lot. And they won't be extremely accurate, but they'll be interesting and they'll be fun. And you know what? I can do another one if I'm not all that pleased with this. And I'm not even going to try to match. I'm going to make up my own key thing. Now that doesn't come out far enough, so I'm just going to do that. And we have another key poking out here. Anyway, I just continued on, and in places, now this, instead of coloring this green, I'm just going to fill it in black. And some of you have a much better way with pen and ink than I do. It's really not my medium, but you can simplify this greatly and do not even maintain the outlines. One could even go ahead and color them in. If you wanted to get a metallic shiny look, it could be very stylized, like so. That's my highlight, and then I'm coloring this in. And it functions sort of as a highlight, pretending that this black thing is not black, but metal. And you do want to put something under here to protect whatever you're working on. And I haven't done that, but anyway. You can also use this as an opportunity to get halftone screening in, get some interesting shapes going on. It could even be a good candidate for Zentangle. One could go ahead and put patterns in just for fun. So that's just a couple of things actually that one could do with a handful of keys.